episode 16, I am told, of the Metaphysical Corner. On the last one, we talked about the first law of thermodynamics, and that was that energy cannot be created or destroyed. There are also the second and third laws, which in reality are, I would say they're not as important, but and we're not going to go in depth in them, I've decided, but it's just to let you know what they are. Basically, they say that order, left to themselves, the universe tends to go in disorder, towards disorder. If you have a home, if you have a neighborhood, and I've seen them, where everyone is vacated, it's a ghost town, or it's a vacant, or not vacant, but all the houses on a street have been abandoned. It doesn't take long before the weeds become 6 feet tall. Houses start to fall apart. What the second, third laws say, they just tend to what's called entropy. And entropy is a measure of the disorder in the universe, tends to increase without something to keep it in check, and that is the use of energy. In other words, you go down a really nice street, nice trim lawns, and everyone's got these people have expended energy to keep the disorder from creeping in, that naturally occurs. So, in other words, for the creation, the universe tends towards disorder, but the use of energy keeps that from happening where it's applied. Okay? So that's basic, Now, it's funny, I don't know about you, but some people have a problem with the concept of energy can't be created or destroyed. It sounds counterintuitive to what we believe. We always think of things being used up and gone, or we can create it as we, the electricity in this room, it's being created, but it's being created from other sources, namely coal, oil, natural gas, nuclear power, whatever. And okay, you in your car, you buy a tank of gas and you burn it all, and you got to get another tank of gas. Now you were in the burning of that full tank of gas, you expended a lot of energy. You burned a lot of energy, but it's not gone. It went into the atmosphere. It heated up the atmosphere. Now, granted, it didn't heat it up much because the atmosphere is pretty big compared to a car. But you give off heat. The average person, I read this once, gives off the heat of about a 100-watt bulb. That the heat that's emanating from your body, just being there. So you got 5 people sitting on a couch. It's like having 5 100-watt bulbs sitting there. They generate just about as much heat. Of course, you're generating it, all 5 of you are, or you by yourself, by the food you eat. And you burn it, and that's what, it creates heat. So, in reality, as counterintuitive as it may seem, the energy in the universe is constant. It's just, it's in totally different forms at all times. It's constantly changing which form it's in, from one form of, it's probably hundreds. But, so that's what you need to, but this all plays a part with, metaphysics and consciousness and other things we're going to talk about, but I want to wrap that up. So that's all you really need to know. And so, because I want to move on to some more exciting stuff now as we get closer to the good stuff. This chapter is called Life is Not Restful. As explained earlier, a chemical reaction is a disturbance at a specific location in the infinite molecular network that is the universe, that is entirely interconnected. At this specific location, the network is modified. because of the chemical reaction. Its composition is affected, and sometimes the temperature, texture, color, odor, and so on are changed. At the same time, this disturbance causes an increase in globular and, one would say, universal molecular disorder. But a chemical reaction has an end. The disorder that the reacting molecules can produce is limited. When a reaction is finished, it's because at this specific location, under the newly created conditions, molecular disorder can no longer increase. It has reached its maximum. This corresponds to the most probable state that could be created under any given conditions. This relative at-rest state is called chemical equilibrium. I will call it just equilibrium. I have referred to it as a relative state because molecules remain agitated by Brownian motion, but the portion of the network that they occupy does not change its composition, its texture, its color, and so on. The system has reached its most probable molecular configuration. For example, when sugar is put in a cup of hot coffee and stirred, the sugar melts and the coffee cools down. It does. Take a sensitive thermometer, stick it in your hot coffee, pour the sugar in, or tea, whatever, and take a temperature after it will have cooled down. Now it may be only a tenth of a degree, 2/10 of a degree, but it cools down. These two phenomena, the sugar mixing with the coffee and the hot mixing with the cold, causes an increase in the disorder, otherwise known as entropy, of the universe. Disorder increases until the concentration of the sugar is the same everywhere in the cup, and the coffee reaches room temperature. When this is achieved, entropy can no longer increase, at least not without something external acting on it. So the chemical system is at equilibrium. I guess that's what the old saying, they say, I remember that about heat. Heat goes from where it is to where it isn't. And like I said before, that's what wind is. But the wind and heat going from where it is to where it isn't is an attempt to make everything the same temperature, everywhere, which of course will never happen. But it's trying, it's constantly trying. Now consider living organisms. From the simplest to the most complex living organism, sometimes one cell like a protozoa, or one like our bodies, which have billions, if not trillions of cells. These cells are made up of molecules. What else could they be made of? The human body contains 50 billion, I've heard of up to a trillion. I guess there's really no way to know the exact amount of cells in a body, on the average body. Of course, someone who weighs a lot is going to have a lot more. This says there are approximately 50 billion cells of 220 different types of cells, different functions, bone cells, nerve cells, whatever. Think about that. I find that mind-blowing myself. That you are truly a machine. What happens inside of you under that skin is nothing short of miraculous. These cells are centers of intense activity. I think we already know this. The heart cells act as small engines that use drawn energy from the reaction between carbon and oxygen to make your heart beat and pump blood. This mechanism operates through innumerable chemical reactions involved in the movement of the cells. Moreover, these cells are constantly being destroyed and reproduce as part of their chemical activity. To maintain the intense activity of these cells, a living organism is in constant contact with its surroundings. It draws energy from the cells to do their job and discharges waste and dead cells. The survival of an organism depends upon these exchanges, which occur only through chemical reactions. This endless activity prevents an organism from reaching chemical equilibrium. In other words, as opposed to inert matter, kind of like a rock, I guess, a living organism is not in equilibrium with its surroundings. Your body temperature will rarely ever be the same as the room temperature. Heat is always going to be coming into you, or you're going to be giving off heat. For example, if our body were in equilibrium with the environment, its temperature would continuously vary in order to be equal to the surrounding temperature. A living organism is not in equilibrium. It never rests. It's like a factory that never stops. Day and night, 24/7. Its molecules are busy forming and breaking chemical bonds that enable you to live. Your chemicals are constantly, and your molecules are constantly reacting even when you're not aware of it. Even in your sleep, you breathe, sweat, you move, and so on. The major difference between inert matter and living matter is the living organism is never at equilibrium for as long as it lives. In fact, for us, as with any other organism, chemical equilibrium means death. You finally bury a body in the ground, the earth and the body will finally come at the same temperature. Imagine that you lying on your bed decide to deprive your body of all energy, food, light, and so on. In other words, you decide to deprive your body of the energy it needs to stay away from equilibrium. What would your molecules do? Where would they go? Without a supply of energy, you would quickly become sick because of faulty reactions. Your cells would decay, your structure would collapse. Your body would break down and become absorbed by the environment. Your molecules would disperse, creating the maximum disorder possible according to the second law of thermodynamics. Things end up going towards disorder. At the end of this process, equilibrium would be reached, your skeleton would remain naked, and its temperature would be that of the room. We can therefore deliberately cease our molecular activity by depriving our organism of the energy necessary to maintain it from equilibrium with the universe. Suspending our consumption of energy would modify our molecular activity and would make us slowly guide towards equilibrium, which we don't want. We know all too well that our death is inevitable. But we usually do not know that this death sentence was signed at birth by the second law of thermodynamics. Let me repeat that sentence. We usually do not know that this death sentence, that we're all going to die one day, was signed at birth by the second law of thermodynamics. It teaches us that equilibrium is the most probable state that a system can reach. Not life. Life goes against the grain, so to speak, in that regard. Life is not a probable state for a chemical system. Death is. Indeed, all that can happen to you in life, isn't death the most probable? Maybe I never thought of it that way, but yeah, I guess so. It is by maintaining exchanges with our surroundings that to some extent we're able to postpone this inevitable end. While inert matter in reaction moves towards equilibrium, living matter avoids it as long as possible. This is the fundamental difference between inert matter and living matter. The general direction of the molecules is diametrically opposite. During each chemical reaction, inert matter is heading towards equilibrium, towards the most probable state, that is, moving towards increased molecular chaos, while living matter, by maintaining exchanges with its surroundings, heads in the opposite direction, towards the improbable, towards organization and life that is life. Going from the most primitive to the most complex organism, we can see that the strategies used to maintain these exchanges with the surroundings and thus avoid equilibrium are incredibly sophisticated. Plants, for example, are content to absorb substances which are found in their immediate neighborhood to maintain their molecular activity. Animals have the ability to move in order to get what they need for their organisms to maintain themselves from equilibrium. Human beings can speak and speak and express their needs. The origin of life. The evolution of living matter from inert matter, mentioned at the beginning of this book, could be the result of an extraordinary journey of molecules away from equilibrium. In this context, metabolism and even reproduction, the two most specific phenomena in the living world, could be seen as the highly sophisticated strategies used by molecular systems to maintain themselves far from equilibrium. In summary, two possibilities seem to dwell in each of the molecules of living matter and during its lifetime. The death instinct, which is engraved in all molecules, corresponds to their attraction to equilibrium, the most probable state. And life instinct, reflected in the cooperation of molecules, maintaining the integrity of these molecules to give life. This is expressed by their attraction towards improbable states, to uncertainty, and not to say adventure, wherever renewing life resides. Indeed, if our own life is ephemeral, life itself seems as immortal as rock. It is often said that speech is what differentiates people or humans from all other animals. However, we have something more. We have that no other living thing possesses: choice. Undeniably, we may choose to stay alive or put an end to our lives just by laying in a bed and waiting for death. At every moment throughout our lifetime, we choose to either succumb to the attraction of our molecules to equilibrium or to continue trying to avoid it. At every moment, we choose between life and death. Now, I'll kind of put things in perspective. I'm going to go a little bit into the next chapter because I've got a little more time here. But this is the next section of the book. And this is when it started, because I'm excited. This is when life gets good. It actually is called Part 2, The Secrets Beyond Matter. And this given chapter is called Biological Information. Do you hear molecules talk? In the enormous molecular network that is our universe, living organisms from the smallest bacteria to the human are made up of cells. These cells, made of molecules, are the sites of intense chemical activity generated by these molecules. During a lifetime, this activity prevents a living organism from reaching equilibrium with its surroundings. Without this ability for self-maintenance, far from equilibrium, all molecules of a living system would move directly towards equilibrium with the universe and would die. Today, as far as science is concerned, this ability is a miracle, the miracle of life. It is the privilege of the living world. Throughout its lifetime, the molecules of a living being receive a deferment from the inevitable. During its lifetime, they ensure its integrity. We could suppose that, as there are four natural forces that prevent our universe from breaking down, there may be a fifth that keeps the molecular assemblies, the living systems, from falling apart by preventing them from reaching equilibrium and disintegrating. We would call this force the vital force, VITAL. It's a term that has actually 100, 200 years ago was very prominent, and then when science really got into gear, it kind of went away. But as the metaphysical world has kind of received a lot of attention lately, I believe in it strongly. And you know, like in Star Wars, may the Force be with you. I believe may be more true than you think. Anyway, we would call this force the vital force, that which during our lifetime holds the cells of our organism together. However, like vital energy, this vital force is not part of the scientific vocabulary. We have to try to find, a scientist who is totally just a scientist will never admit to such a thing, though I think many of them, when they talk to themselves, they gotta go, there's gotta be something else going on. That's how I was. When you look at it from the pure science viewpoint, it's kind of yeah, really, and then you realize, uh, wow, there's something else going on too. Come on, even supposing that it exists, it cannot yet be defined by a formula, and therefore scientists don't want anything to do with it. Much less measured. It can be manipulated to a certain degree. It can be reproduced or destroyed, but its source is unknown. And no one can create it. Moreover, for the moment, science continues to develop quite adequately without it. There are more and more scientists who are willing to say, and including biologists and microbiologists. I think I was reading something just the other day. One of the things about with chakras and all that kind of stuff, we get into it. There's another thing called meridians, which run through the body, which that's a whole series of lectures by itself. But there are microbiologists and biologists which are now starting to admit that they knew of it, they've heard of it, but they would never admit to it. But some of them now are starting to say, yeah, they are real. It explains, because why? It explains a lot. They still really can't prove it. They still really can't point to that and say, there it is. But no, if they look at it logically, matter of fact, when I look at it logically, the vital force, vital energy, it must exist logically. That there's something else. And that's why my interest is like a scientist and engineer, is far beyond just the science and the engineering and the math. I look at it and I say, there's something more. There has to be. To ensure its integrity and functioning, a living organism does business with its environment. Now we know this. This trade can operate only through chemical reactions. All that we breathe, swallow, touch, and that we hear with our nostrils, our eyes perceive, and all that our five senses may grasp, it all leads to chemical reactions. Even the least of our movements, the least of our sighs, the least of our throws is a result of endless, intricate chemical reactions. I wish I could make you understand what happens to you, inside of you, every single day, every single second of every day. You would be blown away. In fact, like any other organism, ours is preoccupied with only one thing: the formation and the rupture of chemical bonds, the production of chemical reactions. These contacts with the environment are vital, but they can also make us sick and kill us, mainly if they get out of control. As infectious diseases, bacterial or viral, also correspond to an enemy invasion, penetration by intruders who take control of part of the chemical activity of our bodies by modifying the course of the chemical reactions is the culprit. The medications we take is a judicious chemical whose purpose is to repair the damaged portion of the network by forcing the undesirable molecules to do elsewise or die and finally be transformed and or leave the organism. We'll talk more about that too. Unfortunately, we all know about prescription drugs. Well, that's a whole other story. Especially with the opioid epidemic, I'm really upset about that. So I'm going to go a couple more paragraphs here and we'll stop. In a healthy body, the network of cells is intact and the activity of the cells is well coordinated, like the activities of a worker at a model factory. This coordination is ensured by the transmission of information. Every cell of your body talks to every other cell virtually. This information, which can be seen as the infrastructure or the instructions that the cells must follow in order to stay together, grow, multiply, and fulfill their functions, is transmitted by molecules. That's what mainly hormones are. Hormones, you hear about a teenager and their raging hormones, and women with their hormones, and men too. it's all, it's hormones are meant to make things happen in the rest of the body. They're created by certain glands in your body, and the hormones are literally transmitters of information to these other cells to do something or not do something, whichever it is. These instructions are written in a language that was discovered only a few decades ago, one whose decipherment has barely begun, a language spoke by molecules. Biologists have concluded that the molecules of living organisms have the capacity to store and transmit information as a result of their reactions. This constant communication between biological molecules allows the correct functioning of cells. Today, only a small number of these molecular messages can be deciphered. This is in its infancy. The potential of this is phenomenal. Because the language used by the molecules is so subtle and so sophisticated that the decoding of the smallest bit of information requires several years of research in the new field of molecular biology. Scientists think that the information stored in the structure of molecules, think that this information is stored in the structure of the molecules of living matter. Compared to molecules of inert matter, the structure of living matter is incredibly complex. They generally contain a very large number of atoms, thousands, millions, if not billions. It is generally accepted that the more complex the structure of the molecule is, the more important the information it contains. And then they start talking about DNA, and that's where we're going to pick it up. Now we are really starting to get to the good stuff. So hope you enjoyed it, and it's going to get more and more interesting with each succeeding video. Take care.